I'm Bobby Grazik, and welcome to this book review. This particular review is going to focus on the House series, a series of 3 novels that take place in the Dune universe, a universe created by Frank Herbert. These 3 novels are written by Frank Herbert's son, Brian Herbert, and Kevin J. Anderson. I'm going to focus on covering the 3 novels as one book, as that's what they wind up being, are 3 volumes of the same story in part 1 of this video. Part 2 will deal with the audio presentation by Tantor Media, read by Scott Brick. So let's get started. The House series is a trilogy. The books that are contained within are House Atreides, House Harkonnen, and House Corrino. You learn that there is a story arc that is being created in House Atreides that is carried through House Harkonnen and subsequently through House Corrino. It is one big book, or 3 big books, because they're rather big, but they are worth reading. They are fantastic. The writing style is very fluid, and it is very similar to the writing style of Frank Herbert, but it does have its differences, and I like the detail that Brian and Kevin go into in terms of expanding on ideas that were made mention to in Frank Herbert's novels. They go back a generation prior to Dune and expand on these concepts and these little story threads that are just sitting there. You get to see the evolution of Leto Atreides as a young adult into the Duke that he becomes, which is an interesting story that you get to see unfold. You get to see him fall in love with Kalia initially prior to Jessica, and become good friends with Prince Romber of Ix. A separate plot line that is put into the story arc is that which is going on Giddy Prime with Duncan, Idaho. Duncan is a young boy in House Atreides, and he ultimately eludes capture by the Harkonnens in these hunts that go on, and he escapes to Caladan, and basically becomes part of the Atreides family. He's adopted by them sort of unofficially, due to his love for their viewpoint, their righteous ways, and the fact that they were willing to take him in, despite the fact that he is Harkonnen. You get to see how Baron Vladimir Harkonnen evolved, starting out as a trim, fit man, and how he is manipulated by the Bene Gesserit to give them a donation of sorts on 2 occasions. On the second occasion, he's not very willing, and because of that, he basically sets a trap for the Bene Gesserit that is to collect the gift, if you will. And then about that Bene Gesserit is Gaius Telemahiam, Paul Atreides' grandmother, you find out in this book, as she is Lady Jessica's mother. She gives birth to Jessica, who you can see evolve and grow to a degree, not as much as you see the character of Leto evolve, but enough to know that she's Bene Gesserit trained, and that she is destined to be with Duke Leto Atreides once he is Duke. There's another plotline going on between the Emperor of the known universe and his son and his son's friend. You have the Emperor, you have his son, Shaddam the Fourth, and you have his friend, Count Hasmir Fenring, a genetic eunuch that is probably one of the most annoying characters written, but one of the most riveting in terms of the way that he is presented. He is so evil, but you can't help but admire his brilliance. On the same note, he gets really annoying as a character because of the way he talks. But this is all so intriguing and so well written that he just seems like the kind of guy that would get on your nerves if you were to have to be exposed to him. And he's not a very likable person, you find out. They have their own scheme, Shaddam and Hasmir, to create a synthetic spice. And this spice would then be able to give them more of a foothold on interplanetary trade, as they wouldn't have to rely on the spice coming from Arrakis. Shaddam winds up marrying a Bene Gesserit, however, due to the carefully aligned breeding program, she is only allowing him to have daughters. So he is not being afforded the luxury of producing a male heir. Part of the Bene Gesserit's grand plan to control everything. And all of these little plots are intertwined and they all connect. It's an amazing, amazing trilogy. Leto ultimately does have one son prior to Paul, and it's a very tragic moment in the book, in the series of books, that unfortunately happens, where he loses this son, and Romber almost loses his life as well. Romber ultimately winds up being more part of Ix than not, as he is somewhat of a technological thinking machine after being rescued from the brink of death, basically, and being given a cyborg type body. there is so much that goes on in this 3-book arc, this trilogy, that I don't want to give away too much, even though I may have already done so. It is definitely worth reading. You get to see how Liet Kynes is on Arrakis. Liet is the son of Pardo Kynes, the original planetologist sent from the Emperor to Arrakis to study the planet, and Pardo Kynes falls in love with this idea of terraforming Arrakis, only to find that the Fremen, the desert dwellers of Arrakis, have already begun this process in many ways, or the process had begun ages and ages ago. And Pardo Kynes passionately speaks to them, and at first is very much a thorn in their side, more so than you think, and ultimately he is accepted, and therefore his son is part Fremen, Liet, and Liet becomes the planetologist, following his father's unfortunate demise. So there is a wonderful evolution that you can see, and at the moment you can see my cat's tail as well, making her video debut at this point in time is my cat's, well, one of 4 cats, that is. This is Bootsy Mittens. Hello, Bootsy Mittens. Say hello to the cute camera. There she goes. So there you have the story of, in a summary of the House series. Is it worth reading? Yes. Are the titles accurate? No. Read it as a series. Do not read it expecting to learn separate aspects of the individual houses. Is the House series an exciting read? Yes, very much so. So that concludes the review of the House series books. I would give the books a well-deserved 10 out of 10 in terms of writing, in terms of content and plot development. My only gripe is the titling of these books. This is a consistent theme, though, with Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson. And it's something I've gotten used to. I just thought I'd make mention of it here. Strictly because I, as a visually impaired person, popping in a disc that says House Atreides, at first you're thinking, oh, it's going to be a historical backdrop of the House Atreides, but it turns out to be a much more involved story than that. And as I said, it takes in all of the houses of the Landrad, and as I described, it sort of ties in all of these individual plot lines from these individual stories. So I hope you enjoyed this review of the House series. Once again, the books contained within: House Atreides, House Harkonnen, and House Corrino. Coming up next is my audio review of the audio presentation of these 3 novels by Tenetor Media, read by Scott Brick.